Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Speakers Inc. We Speak Global Speaker Showcase. Another fantastic speaker with us today. And remember, once we've done what we are going to do in terms of listening to the talk and also asking a few very pertinent questions, all of the footage will then also be available on the Speakers Inc. website, where you can find out more about Adam. Yes, his name is Adam. It is, in fact, Adam Markel. I'm very excited today to introduce our guest for today, Adam Markel, co-founder and CEO of the More Love Media Company. Adam is a resilience researcher, keynote speaker, and #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Not bad at all. In his latest bestseller, Change Proof: Leveraging the Power of Uncertainty to Build Long-Term Resilience, Adam guides individuals and organizations to tap the power of resilience to meet the challenges of constant change and disruption. As an attorney, business, and workplace expert, Adam has spent over a decade training, coaching, and facilitating programs worldwide in the areas of business, resilience, public speaking, and leadership. Adam is inspired by his wife of more than 30 years and their 4 amazing children. Today, we're going to get a taste of Adam's insights and strategies for creating sustainable long-term success. I, for one, can't wait. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Markel.
Yes, I am a resilience guy. And here's how it all started. 3 whistles rang out. And I knew what that meant. I was a lifeguard. I was 19 years old. And 3 whistles on the beach meant someone was missing. I ran down to the main stand, and our captain shouted the order. They lost someone at field 3. It's a search and rescue. Go. 10 of us ran down to the beach to join the search team. There was already a crowd. People were pointing to where they last saw the missing swimmer. We dove into the ocean. We swam out past the breaker, and we formed a straight line perpendicular to the shore. We started our search. We dove down about 10 feet into the cold, dark Atlantic, and we swam into the current and came straight up for air. When everyone's head popped up, we repeated that process again and again and again. We were exhausted, but we didn't come in. After more than an hour, we heard those whistles again. It was a terrible feeling. We weren't done. We hadn't found him. We got out of the water, and our captain led us in a moment of silence. And when we opened our eyes, he looked at us and he said, "No one goes down in our water. At this beach, no one goes down on our watch." And then he said something to us that I will never forget. You either make the save or you die trying. Just a little bit intense, huh? But for so many of us, that was our first experience with that kind of a loss, that kind of grief. It was brutal. We were so young. And we were asked to get back up in the lifeguard stand. The people that were there were allowed to go back in the water, and we had to get back up in the lifeguard stand and do our job. We had to be resilient. We had to learn how to be resilient that day. For so many of us, we have had to learn how to be resilient in the face of so much disruption. These last 2 years, this pandemic, this seemingly unending disruption, this seemingly endless uncertainty that we've been dealing with, all of us, has taught us something individually and collectively about what it means to be resilient. That's the conversation that we get to have together today. So right now, I want you, wherever you're sitting, whatever you're doing, just define this term for you. Your experience. What does it mean to be resilient? How do you look at it? How do you see it? What have you learned about it? For so many people, it's defined differently. But often we hear resilience is about how we bounce back. How do we get back up after a setback? We've been researching this topic for so many years now. In fact, for the last several years, we've been assessing resilience with leaders across the globe and having conducted more than 3,000 assessments of leaders from Fortune 50 companies to startups and sort of everything in between. What we found is that resilience is not how we bounce back. It's actually how we use uncertainty as a catalyst for growth. It's how we leverage the power even of adversity and uncertainty to do something that organizations and individuals that thrive are routinely able to do and others are not. It's kind of a secret. In many ways, it's a superpower. At least that's what it was for us on the beach. It's our capacity to not just endure, but it's our capacity to recover. It's not just our ability to bounce back, but our ability to bounce forward that defines the level of resilience that we have. Resilient organizations are those that are healthier. They're more energized. They have more energy to power through. They have less incidents of burnout and more loyalty because fewer people are actually looking at the grass elsewhere. They're not seeing the grass greener because what they need to succeed is already present with them where they are. Right now, more than ever before, we have to learn how to develop resilience in this moment. Because as I know my own name is Adam, and then I don't have a whole lot of hair up here, I know that this is not the last great disruption, great uncertainty that we will face in our lives. And so we must develop our resilience now before we will be called upon to need it again. Develop it now before we need it next is the concept. But again, for so many people, they define resilience as endurance, as the capacity to simply take the punches, take the hits, and keep going endlessly. I got to ask you, how has that been working for you when there's endless uncertainty, when everything that has caused us to see things differently, to be forced into seeing things differently, all of the disruptions have not ended and there's no end in sight. Can you run an endless marathon is really a question we have to each ask ourselves. But for so many people, they look at resilience, they look at it through the lens, through the eyes of this guy right here, right? We all love Rocky. And by the way, there'll be a little bit of a subtext of this in this conversation that involves the movies. There'll be some quizzes, some things I'm going to ask you, and I want to see how you do. You can test yourself. So first of all, what's the year that the first Rocky movie came out? What's your answer? For so long, I've been saying it was anybody got this one? 76? When it's actually 1977. They finished the movie in 76. I'm a bit of a movie lover and fan, and I've been saying it's 76, but it really was 77. And I remember now seeing that movie with my dad. It was one of the first movies as a kid that I recall seeing on the big screen and hearing that amazing Rocky theme song. I mean, I can hear it in my head right now. I don't know if you can hear it in your head right now because it's such an empowering and just wonderful musical representation of what it feels like to just be amped up in the moment, to be so motivated in the moment. I remember leaving the theater that day and running and my dad to kind of bring me back to the car and settle me down. And Rocky is an amazing example for so many people of what it means to be resilient, to be able to take the punch. In fact, first of all, how many times does Rocky get hit in this movie? Do you know? I'm going to go back. I've not yet done this, but I'm planning to go back and watch this movie and count the number of times that this guy literally gets knocked to the ground and has the capacity to get back up. By the way, how many Rocky movies have they made? I know the answer to this one. Do you? 5, 6, 26, 27? How many Rocky movies, including the Creed movies, have they made? The answer is 8. 8 Rocky movies. And it's wonderful Hollywood movie making because he wins our hearts, but in the end, he loses the fight. And as the people from Philadelphia might say, he don't look too good in the end, does he? That's how people define that resilience, is that capacity to simply endure. And what our research has told us over and over and over again is that resilience is not about endurance, it's about recovery. If there's one thing that I want you to remember from this talk, from this conversation right now, it is that the old paradigm of seeing resilience as simply our ability to move forward in spite of obstacles, that is an old way of seeing it, and it's a way that perpetuates a paradigm of exhaustion and burnout. Resilience is actually about how it is that we recover. And I use an example of a wonderful woman who wrote an article recently. Her name is Blair Braverman, and she's an Alaskan sled dog musher. Just say that word to yourself, musher, meaning she races these beautiful Alaskan huskies through the tundra for hundreds of miles. In fact, she races in something called the Iditarod. It's a 1,000-mile race through for the frozen tundra of Alaska. And the one thing that she knows about these dogs, her beautiful dogs, is that they will race, they will run and run and run until they cannot run anymore. They will run their race until they cannot continue, because it's baked into their DNA to do that, to just keep going, to keep going. I don't know if you know anybody that's like that. Is that person sitting in your seat right now? Just continue to go and go and go until you just can't go anymore, till you end up exhausted. Or these dogs are the same way. But she knows something about them that they don't know about themselves. That in that race that's 1,000 miles long, if she just lets them do what's natural for them to do, they can never win, because it is far more time consuming for them to recover from their exhaustion, from their fatigue, if they let it get that far. If she lets it get that far. So what she does is she rests them before they know they need rest. She feeds them before they know they're hungry. She gives them water before they know that they're thirsty, because she understands that they cannot take care of themselves in that respect. They will keep going until they cannot go anymore. And the concept is simple. It is so much easier to prevent the fatigue in the first place than to recover from it later. So I ask you, what are some of the signs of exhaustion that you're seeing in your workplace, even in your families, in yourself, the people around you? What are the signs of burnout even that you're seeing? Short-temperedness, impatience, greater number of mistakes, the frequency of errors, anger, frustration with ourselves, sleeplessness, or having trouble getting to sleep. There's so many signs right now that people are seeing. Anxiety seems to be an epidemic in our world right now. This sort of low-level anxiety that we're experiencing almost continually, this constant cocktail of cortisol that is coursing through our bodies each and every day, are signs of something we call burnout. My daughter gave me a book a couple of years ago that sat on the shelf, in all honesty, for a while. She was studying, and in college came upon this book and thought I would enjoy it. But I did pick it up eventually. I started to read it. And right in the middle of this wonderful book by Dan Ariely called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, there's a chapter on something called depletion. And the essence of this book, and I highly recommend that you check it out, is that we're all a little predisposed to gilding the lily or telling a white lie. It's just kind of part of human nature to do that a bit. But when we are depleted, the instances where we will tell those lies or make mistakes or be impatient or be reactive or make poor decisions rises dramatically. When we are depleted, in other words, we are not able to think big. We're not able to think beyond the moment. We're not able to think critically and address the most challenging issues in our professional lives and our personal lives with creativity. We cannot do it because it's simply our minds, when we're stressed, our minds, when we're in fight or flight, cannot think critically, cannot think creatively, cannot think beyond the obstacle that's facing us. So it's imperative that we see these two things for what they are. They are mutually exclusive. Stress and strategy just don't go together well. But we're not going to get rid of stress, are we? So what we have to focus on in being resilient is how it is that we address that stress. And for that, I want to use the example of Formula One racing. It's something I love watching. My son and I, we love to watch the Netflix special, looking at these race car drivers. And what's amazing is that they often, in the midst of a race, will come into the pit area to change their tires, to get a tank of gas. And it's remarkable because if they don't do that, they're penalized in the end by time being added. So it's a requirement, in other words, that they take those pit stops. And the reason for that is that if they don't, and they are dangerous to themselves and they're dangerous to everyone else on the track. But what's really amazing to me is the fact that those pit stops where they change all their tires, they do some minor repair work, or they fill up the tank with gas, takes 2 to 3 seconds at most often. Just a couple of seconds to refuel, to recharge, to retread even. And they understand that fundamentally they cannot win the race if they are racing on worn out tires, worn out systems, on half a tank of gas. How many of you know people that are really running on fumes right now, running on empty, running on those exhausted tires, still thinking that they can finish the race, win the race even? Well, you can't do it. And that's the point. But we've got to find something to replace some of our old paradigm, our default way of seeing how it is that we face challenges, especially when the challenges don't seem to be slowing up. They're only going faster. The world seems to only be getting faster, and the uncertainty is unending. So what do you do about it? You create resilience in a different way. We see it differently. So resilience isn't one single thing. It's not one amorphous thing. It's actually comprised of 4 separate areas. And you would imagine these are the areas that we are comprised of. It's holistic resilience that we're talking about: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And it's in recognizing that it's not one thing alone that we find our solution. The solution is to create resilience in each of those areas using specific techniques that we're going to talk about in just a couple of minutes. So one of the things that often we share with organizations like yours that is really powerful is how it is that we assess our level of resilience and the baseline, the information that we get at the very beginning. So what you can see right here in front of you is a pie chart of an aggregate score across more than 3,000 leader assessments. That we can see that on average, people taking this 3-minute long assessment score 64 out of 100. 64 out of 100. You can imagine what it would feel like if the people in your organization, the people on your team, the people in your life were performing at 64% of capacity on average. It leaves quite a bit of room for improvement, and that's the good news. It leaves so much room for us to be able to do better. Again, taking a look at what is typically the case when people take this assessment, you can see that question number 1 is showing that globally, across the board, organization to organization, individual to individual, people are not taking time on a regular basis to quiet their mind. And in this instance, the yellow is area for improvement, the green is area where people are doing quite well, and the red, unlike in football, the red zone is an area that we've got to pay attention to because there's something happening there that is actually more dire. So as you can see, a lack of time to quiet the mind is contributing to a low score in the mental zone. On the emotional side, in question 8, you can see it's green, that people often believe in their own talents and abilities to create solutions. They trust their own talents and ability to rise above the challenges. So that's amazing. On the physical side, the entire quadrant is red, which is astounding. Across the board, that the entire thing is red. And you can see all of the scores are under 70. And question 12, I am definitely one of those people that checks my phone a lot during the day. 23 indicates that people are practically, and maybe this applies to you as well, they have this phone with them, their phone with them all of the time. Practically sleeping with it, I'd say. Waking up first thing in the morning, touching it, looking at it, and then having some interaction with that phone technology 150 to 200 times a day. It's something called constant cognitive arousal. And it means that people are constantly checking in. And again, that low-level anxiety in many ways, based on research, is tied to the number of times that we're actually checking in with our phone, checking our email, checking our voicemail, checking messages, checking in on social media. Now, in this last category, spirit, what you can see that's really telling is question 13 is entirely green. The score is 85. I'm engaged in a livelihood that is in line with my core values and beliefs. That is an amazing score. And yet what you can also see in question 14 is that there are significant gaps between what I say is most important in my life and how I actually allocate my time and energy. And question 15, so many people don't feel as though they're investing enough time and energy in making a positive difference to others or to the world. And in question 16, that so many people are starting the day not feeling a sense of greater purpose to what it is that they're doing in their days. So an ounce of recovery is worth a pound of resilience. Just something I made up based on that old statement that we probably all heard our grandparents say, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of what? Cure. Exactly.
So Adam, thank you so very much for your time, and also for your time as far as answering a couple of questions. I do have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you immediately. I feel energized after watching you, by the way, so thank you for that. The first question is, we are living through a time of massive disruption, are we not? Wow. Fear and uncertainty as well. What is one simple thing that we can do right now to build resilient relationships, teams, and organizations?
I love that question, Dwayne. I mean, one simple thing. That's great. Well, I think for one thing, we have to redefine what resilience is. And it's interesting because at this point in what has been the most prolific disruption of business and personal relationships that we've seen in many of our lifetimes. In fact, more than 65% of people that we've surveyed say that this last 2 years has been the single most disruptive time in their professional careers. So that says a lot. And in the midst of that, the word resilience has gotten thrown around quite a bit. And I think right now people even push back on that word because it's been used almost as a euphemism for suck it up or figure it out or just keep going. Because it's in so many people in their definition of resilience, the lexicon they use for that term, they think of it as the ability to bounce back or the ability to endure. And I've been a researcher for a number of years now. I was a lawyer for 18 years. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've been a CEO for many, many years as well. And more recently, I've been a researcher. So more than 4,000 resilient leader assessments have been conducted by our company. And we've analyzed that data. And what we found is that resilience is not about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward. Resilience is not about how we endure, but actually how we recover. And so what we found is that definitionally speaking, we have to change our language. We have to change the paradigm. The paradigm has already shifted, but a lot of people are still playing from that old piece of sheet music, and that's not serving them in this moment. Not, as you said, not with regard to their relationships, their professional endeavors, or their physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual well-being. And that's where I think we can meet the moment with what is both new information and new activity, things that we can do, new actions we can take that will create those zones of recovery so people can be more resilient going forward.
And am I wrong? The worst possible thing you could ever tell somebody to do in a difficult situation is to suck it up. There is nothing more useless in the world. Am I right?
Well, and it's interesting because often the word suck it up isn't used, even though a lot of people, when they think about resilience, again, old paradigm is this idea that we have to be tenacious or that we have to grit it out. So grit is another euphemism for suck it up. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was really just hang in there. Can you hang in there? Can you hang in there? You know, you told that to the people that you were leading, or that maybe you were given that information by others, as well. Can you just hang in there for 3 more months? Hang in there for 6 more months. The supply chain is going to ease, abate. Things will change. Things will go back to normal. Everybody sort of was waiting for the first year for things to go back to normal, but there is no going back. There's no going back to anything that we would call normal. it is very much the now normal and the next normal. And so when we think about how it is that we navigate the future, how we learn from the future, we have to be resilient in the present, which means we have to perform resilience in the present. And that's really where our work comes to play. That's where my research and the work that I do with organizations really, I think, does meet the moment. And we had a book that came out in February that also, timing wise, couldn't have been better. I had a book, a very well-received best-selling book some years ago called Pivot. And when that book came out in 2016, and this is actually the relaunch of that book in a paperback, that book even at the time was received in, sort of with a lot of sort of mixed emotion, because people weren't ready to adopt or embrace the word pivot. I only wish I had a nickel for every time people have used the word pivot in the last couple of years, right? This book, I think, really hit the mark. Leveraging the power of uncertainty to build long-term resilience is really what we're about these days. And that's where I think, there's great room for growth, because resilient organizations are healthier. Their people are happier. Their people actually work out more by more than an hour and a half a week, more than less resilient individuals do. And they're more productive. And to the point right now, there is 73% less turnover at organizations where people are more resilient and are being trained. And this is really where it's, I think, quite key. They're being trained. They're being given help in becoming more resilient. I think so often it is that people think that you're either born resilient, when some people are born more resilient. Maybe people endure hardship when they're children and they become more resilient as that. And they think that's it. That's sort of just what's genetically in the code. But what we've also learned from, again, more than 4,000 of these research case studies that we've conducted is that you can learn resilience at any age, any age.
It's fantastic, because I think we are now becoming more and more resilient, which is helping us to move forward. I've looked at the T-shirt. I love the T-shirt, Change Proof. The book, Change Proof. I get that as well. But now, what does change?
I've never been known for my subtlety.
No, I love that though. We're not subtle human beings. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this business in the first place, would we?
I love talking teas, and it's so funny when I give these talks all over the world, and a lot of them are virtual, and many in person these days. Still, people love the talking teas. In fact, they ask me to wear them. I usually wear a sport jacket over it, and then at some point I take that jacket off. But yeah, the talking tea is important because, again, we're in so many ways, we're wearing the message of our brand in our communications, in so many of the things that we are doing verbally and non-verbally, subtly, not so subtly, etc. I'm being not so subtle in this moment.
And I think it works brilliantly well. Let's talk about it for a second. Change proof. That phrase, what does that mean in relation to resilience? In terms of how you've been talking to people, what does it mean?
Well, it really does mean what the subtitle implies, that we have to learn how to leverage uncertainty and the unknown and even adversity as a catalyst for something that is vitally important to us individually, but also in terms of any organization we're a part of, and that is growth. We gain growth, we gain strength when we recover from some form of stress. So what's at issue right now is that because organizations don't appreciate that new definition often and have to learn it, they don't have the recovery component baked into the DNA of the organization. It's not baked into their value set. It's not baked into their SOPs. It's not baked into what's being modeled by senior level leaders. And there isn't a system where the organization has each other's backs. So often I start my keynotes with a story that happened when I was 19 years old as a lifeguard, an Ocean Beach lifeguard, where there was a big rescue happening. I start my keynote with 3 whistles. And I do that to get into this idea of what I had to learn and what our lifeguard crew was compelled to learn on the beach that particular summer after that tragic incident. And that was how it is that we create recovery zones throughout the day. The thing I call it is a toggle. We toggle back and forth between our energy zone and our rest and our recovery zones. And when you learn how to do that throughout the day in specific instances, mentally, emotionally, physically, and yes, even spiritually, then what you have is increased capacity, increased productivity. You have greater levels of fulfillment, excitement. People are able to go the distance, but not because they're trying to win the Night Owl Award or burn the candle at all ends or just suck it up. Because again, that's old paradigm that does not work in the environment that we're living in right now. And we've got to learn a new one.
You've said recovery a couple of times. I think it's so important. I really do. And resilience a good few times. The final question is going to be this. If we had the resources, if we had the possibility and the ability to do this, if we could commit to one or two things to operationalize resilience for our companies, what would give us the most bang for buck?
You know what? I'll just summarize it with those four things I mentioned a second ago. If you wanted to operationalize resilience, you have to have it be something that is actually a part of your value set, meaning it can't be a ticking the box. You know, we have mental health issues that are skyrocketing right now, and it's great to bring in somebody. It's great to have a mental health hour or day even. But frankly, if it's just the idea du jour, everybody understands that the organization is not really committed to it. So it has to become a part of your value set, which means that the standard operating practices and procedures have to also reflect that. We have to model it as leaders for others, but not just because it's good for us to do that. You know, the old expression, put the oxygen mask on first, that kind of thing. It goes beyond that, because when you are actually practicing recovery rituals so that you become more resilient, you're giving permission. By that example, you're giving other people permission to do it. So it's modeling and permission. And lastly, there has to be a support system, a safety net, which we call got your back partnerships, meaning that the organization, and I learned this at the beach as a lifeguard, we were able to be successful because we had each other's backs and we understood that was in fact the case. So partnerships that we call GYB partnerships get established within an organization pretty easily, so that we're checking in on one another, so that we are checking on not just how people are doing, but what they're doing in order to create those moments of recovery that ultimately produce greater growth and greater resilience.
I could talk to you for days, and I sucker punched you ever so slightly because I said that was the last question. This is going to be the last question, if you don't mind. And it's really away from the talk and away from the theme, but it's more about Adam himself. What gets you up in the morning? You've got this real zest for life. I can see a real energy and passion, enthusiasm. What gets you up in the morning and says, right, another good day, another day today to make a bit of a difference? What is it? What drives you?
I love life. I love life. I was a lawyer for 18 years, and I told this story on a TED stage a couple of years ago. I used to wake up during that period of time in my life, feeling sort of dread and anxiousness. And I actually ended up in the hospital with what was a significant panic attack that was masquerading as a heart attack, because I thought I was never going to see my kids again. I mean, blessed to be married to my college sweetheart. We have 4 healthy kids, and it was terrifying. But when I got out of the hospital that day, I didn't know what to change in my life. I just had this inspiration to start my day a little differently. So my rising ritual became something that I'm well known for, and have a little book in my hand called the I Love My Life Challenge, because this concept of getting up, starting your day with a rising ritual that might include gratitude. For me, it includes saying those 4 words, I love my life. I have a talking tea that says, I love my life. So the fact of the matter is, I wake up with energy, Dwayne, because it's my desire to do that, but it's also a part of my practice and what I perform each day in the way of creating resilience, that I start with gratitude, and I just love life. And I think there's so much that's difficult in our lives on any given day. On the best of days, we have difficulties, but to be in love with life, no matter what, to love our lives, to be grateful for, to appreciate the blessing of the day that we've been given, et cetera, I think it's more powerful than often we realize. And we can always make time for a 10-second, check-in in the morning, especially when we wake up and feel that. And that's what amps me up right out of the gate. And I think truly, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, when we own the beginning of the day, whether it's the first 10 minutes or 30 minutes, we're not just sort of routinely going for our phone and getting sucked into the daily activities and responsibilities and even challenges. If we can own that beginning of the day, there's a greater chance that we're going to own other parts of the day. If we start off, as my grandmother would say, on the right foot, the chances are that the momentum we create from that small activity at at the beginning will pay dividends throughout the day. And that's what you're looking at right now. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have challenges. It just means I'm getting off on the right foot, and that's going to carry a lot of the day all by itself.
I'm smiling from ear to ear because I agree with every single word. If you own that first, it's almost, for me, it's like making the bed in the morning. Well, I've won that challenge. I think we're good to go. I think there really is. Adam, thank you again for your time. It's been fascinating. And like I said, I could talk to you for hours. Unfortunately, you don't have enough time for all of that. So I'm going to ask everybody online once again to give Adam, I beg your pardon, listen to me, a big round of applause. Thank you so much for your time, for your energy, and a great talk. If indeed you would like to find out more about Adam, you simply log on to speakersinc.com, talk to Duncan and Bronwyn. They'll give you all the details. Find out how you can make Adam part of your next event. Everybody, thank you so much once again. And Adam, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. Really has been.
Thank you, Dwayne.
See you next time. Cheers.